I'm Madison. The church was in an uproar. My aunts were shouting, my cousins had stood up, and Father Thompson was trying to restore order. All eyes were on me, my husband Lucas, and the blonde woman, Ava, who was wearing my mother's precious jewelry. Ava held up her left hand, showing my mother's 3-carat diamond solitaire, and declared, "Fiancé." I felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under me. Lucas, the man I thought I knew, released my hand. His face went through a series of expressions: panic, calculation, and then resignation. "Julia, I can explain," he said, but his words sounded hollow. "Explain? Explain how my mother's jewelry ended up on your mistress." I laughed, a sharp and bitter sound. "My dying mother didn't need her family heirlooms? So you stole them for your girlfriend?" "It all started a few weeks ago. My mother, a kind-hearted and artistic woman, had been in hospice for 8 weeks. She was a well-known local painter, and her art collection was a family treasure. Along with that, she had a magnificent Burmese emerald suite, which had been passed down from my grandmother on her wedding day. According to the insurance appraisal, it was worth $450,000. My family was quite well off. My parents had built a successful business in the art world. My mother was always warm and welcoming, and she had a large circle of friends in her 60s and 70s. My father was a calm and wise man who had passed away a few years ago. Lucas and I had been married for 5 years. He worked in the corporate world, often traveling for business. He was charming and seemed to be the perfect husband. When my mother entered hospice, he volunteered to take care of her house, getting her mail and making sure everything was in order. I was so grateful for his help, as I wanted to be by my mother's side every moment. 3 weeks ago, the jewelry went missing from my mother's house. I reported the theft to the police, and Detective Laura Hill was assigned to the case. I took photos of all the missing pieces for the police report. On the day of my mother's funeral, I was sitting in the church, grief-stricken. The funeral director had warned me that grief could cause hallucinations, but I wasn't imagining the sight of Ava in the 3rd row, wearing my mother's emerald necklace. She was a young woman, probably in her early 30s, with a sleek blonde look from an expensive salon and a dress that showed off her figure. I gripped the pew in front of me, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Lucas sat beside me, his hand on my back, but I noticed he kept glancing at the 3rd row. "Who is that?" I whispered. He followed my gaze and went rigid. "I don't know. Probably one of your mom's friends," he said, but I knew something was wrong. As the service started, I couldn't focus on Father Thompson's words. Every time I glanced back, I saw more of my mother's missing jewelry on Ava. The diamond tennis bracelet, the pearl drops, it was all there. When we stood for the first hymn, Ava turned and our eyes met. She gave me a small, knowing smile and touched the emerald necklace deliberately. I felt sick to my stomach. "I need air," I whispered to Lucas and slipped out the side door. In the courtyard, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photos for the police report. Every missing piece was on Ava, like trophies. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Mrs. Carter," it was Detective Hill. She was in a black pantsuit, appropriate for a funeral. "Detective, what are you doing here?" I asked. "Following up on a tip. Someone called about seeing the stolen jewelry," she said. She studied my face. "Was it you?" "No, I stopped." "You can see it, too?" "The woman inside, 3rd row?" "Ava Reed." "Interesting that she'd show up here," Detective Hill said, pulling out her phone and showing me a driver's license photo. "Same blonde, same sharp features. Recognize her?" "No." "Should I?" I asked. "She's been on our radar for a while. She tends to befriend married men with access to valuable items. We've never been able to prove anything," she said. Then she paused. "Is your husband inside?" "Yes, he's." The implication hit me like a cold shower. No, Lucas wouldn't, I said, but deep down, I was starting to have doubts. Detective Hill asked me how long my mother was in hospice. I told her 8 weeks. And your husband had access to her house? She asked. We both did. We were checking on it, getting her mail. I stopped. Lucas had insisted on taking on those tasks alone, and I'd trusted him. Mrs. Carter, I need you to go back inside. Act normal. Can you do that? She said. You're going to arrest her? I asked. She's wearing $450,000 in stolen jewelry to the victim's funeral. Yes, I'm going to arrest her, but I need to do this carefully if she's working with someone, she said. I walked back into the church on unsteady legs. Lucas looked relieved when I sat down beside him. Feeling better? He whispered. Yes, I said, lacing my fingers through his, and noticing his sweaty palm. The service continued. When my aunt spoke about my mother's generosity and how she'd always promised the jewelry would stay in the family, I felt Lucas's hand twitch. Finally, Father Thompson invited everyone to share their memories. Various friends stood up and told stories of my mother's kindness, her art, and her laughter. Then Ava stood up. I didn't know Mrs. Carter well, she began, her voice clear. But her generosity touched my life. She gave me. She touched the necklace. Such beautiful gifts through someone who knew I treasured them. The church went silent. My aunts exchanged shocked looks, recognizing the jewelry. Lucas's hand tightened on mine. That's lovely, Father Thompson said uncertainly. Would you like to share more about? Actually, Detective Hill stood up from the back row. I'd like to speak with you, Ms. Reed. Outside. Ava's composure cracked slightly. I'm attending a funeral and wearing stolen property. We can do this quietly or I can arrest you in front of everyone. Your choice, Detective Hill said. These were gifts. I have proof, Ava said, her voice rising. Perfect. You can show me outside, Detective Hill replied. But Ava didn't move. Instead, she turned to look at Lucas. Tell them, baby. Tell them you gave these to me. The whole church turned to look at us. Lucas released my hand. His face showed a mix of emotions. Julia, I can explain, he said again. Explain? Explain how you stole from my dying mother to impress your mistress. I shouted. He tried to defend himself. Your mom was dying. She didn't need it. The jewelry was just sitting there. Ava deserved it. My mother wasn't even dead yet. I was sitting by her bedside while he was stealing from her. You were stealing from her while I was with her. I cried. Detective Hill reached Ava, who was backing away. Ms. Reed, you're under arrest for receiving stolen property. He gave them to me. He said his wife didn't care about jewelry and it would be wasted, Ava said. I never said that, Lucas interjected. But then Detective Hill brought up the texts where he'd said I was too boring to appreciate nice things and where he'd promised to marry Ava once he got his share of my mother's estate. I sank into the pew. My family surrounded me, offering support, but I could only stare at Lucas, the stranger now. How long? I asked quietly. He couldn't meet my eyes. Lucas. How long? 2 years, he said. I thought about all the times he'd worked late, traveled for business, and been too tired for dinner. All the times he'd volunteered to check on my mother's house alone. Detective Hill cuffed Ava, who was now crying. This isn't fair. He promised. He said once the old lady died. Shut up, Lucas snapped. My aunt, Sarah, my mother's sister, stood up. That old lady was a saint who welcomed you into our family, Lucas. She defended you when we said you weren't good enough for Madison. And this is how you repay her, she said. My uncle, David, added, stealing from her deathbed. I want a lawyer, Ava announced. Good idea, Detective Hill said. Mr. Carter, I need you to come with me as well. Am I under arrest? Lucas asked. Not yet. But we need to discuss your involvement in the theft, she replied. Lucas looked at me desperately. Madison, please. I made a mistake. We can work through this. Work through this? You stole my dying mother's jewelry to give to your mistress, who wore it to her funeral. There's nothing to work through, I said, finally finding my strength. As Detective Hill led them out, Ava still protesting, the church slowly settled. My mother's picture smiled from the front, and I wondered if she was laughing at the drama. After the service, in the reception hall, Detective Hill found me. We've recovered all the jewelry. Ms. Reed was very cooperative once she realized your husband had lied about owning the pieces, she said. What happens now? I asked. They'll both be charged. Theft, receiving stolen property, conspiracy. Your husband admitted to taking the jewelry, but claims it was a loan. A loan from a woman in hospice? Yes, his story needs work, she said. I'm sorry this happened at your mother's funeral, she added. Actually, I think Mom would have loved it. She always enjoyed a good drama, and she never liked Lucas. This was like her final review, I said, surprising myself. That evening, after the guests had gone and the flowers had been distributed, I sat in my mother's empty house with the recovered jewelry in front of me. Each piece had a story, a history. The emerald suite had survived 3 generations. Lucas had only seen the monetary value, but my mother had seen the true worth, the connections to the women who'd worn them before and the promises to the women who'd wear them after. My phone was filled with messages from Lucas, but I deleted them unread and called a divorce attorney. My husband stole from my dying mother to impress his mistress, I told him. That's a new one, he said. But helpful for the divorce. When can you come in? I fingered the emerald necklace, thinking of my mother's last words to me, don't let anyone dim your sparkle, sweetie. Tomorrow, I said. I have a funeral to finish today. Later, I learned the full story. Lucas and Ava had met at a business conference 2 years ago. He promised to leave me after things settled down, after his promotion, after the holidays, and then after my mother got sick. He'd been stealing from my mother's house for months, starting with small pieces he thought I wouldn't notice. Ava genuinely believed Lucas was rich and generous. She'd been posting photos of the gifts on Instagram, and that's how Detective Hill was alerted. A sharp-eyed follower recognized the distinctive emerald suite from a magazine feature about estate jewelry. The trial was swift. Lucas pled guilty to avoid a harsher sentence, got 2 years probation, and had to pay restitution. Ava got community service and had to return everything. Their relationship didn't survive the first court appearance. Lucas's last email to me before I blocked him everywhere was full of self-pity. He claimed to be the real victim, seduced by a younger woman, trapped in a loveless marriage, and forced to desperate measures. I wore the emerald suite to the divorce proceedings. The judge, an elderly woman with sharp eyes, noticed immediately. Beautiful jewelry, she commented. Thank you. It was my mother's. My ex-husband tried to give it to his mistress, I said. Did he now? She said, reviewing the papers with renewed interest. The divorce was finalized in record time. I got everything except Lucas's debts from financing Ava's lifestyle. A year later, I wore the emerald suite again, this time to an exhibition of my mother's art collection. The charity auction raised $60,000 for the hospice that had cared for her. I still have the Instagram posts Ava made, screenshots Detective Hill gave me for the case. Blessed by my generous man, one caption read under a photo of her wearing my mother's pearls. The comments from her friends were like, so lucky. He's a keeper. When's the wedding? Aged like milk. Sometimes I wonder if my mother somehow orchestrated the whole thing from beyond. She'd always said Lucas would show his true colors eventually, and I just needed to pay attention. She was right, of course. Mothers usually are. I wear her jewelry often now, each piece a reminder that some things can't be stolen, only borrowed. Love, legacy, the bonds between mothers and daughters, those endure beyond death, beyond betrayal, beyond men who see treasure where they should see trust. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they lead to justice being served at a funeral, with a detective's hand on your shoulder and your mother's jewelry gleaming like evidence in the light of stained glass windows. My mother would have loved that part especially.